After traveling and teaching throughout and performing great signs and wonders, the people still had little faith, and asked for a sign that he was indeed the Ibn Aliyun El. Yeshua, reluctant, then created at the will of Aliyun El various kinds of birds out of clay, which he animated with his breath, so that they ate and drank and flew up and down like natural birds. He healed in one day by his prayer 50,000 blind and leprous persons, whose cure the best physicians of those times had been unable to effect. He recovered many dead who, after he had recalled them to life, married again and had children, and he even raised up Shem, the son of Noah, who, however, died again immediately. But he not only revived men, but even isolated parts and limbs. During his wanderings, he one day found a skull near the Dead Sea, and his disciples asked him to recall it to life. Yeshua prayed to Aliyun El, and then turning to the skull said, "Live by the will of the Yahuwah and tell us how you have found death, the grave, and the future state." The skull then assumed the form of a living head and said, "Know you, O prophet of Aliyun El, that about 4,000 years ago, after taking a bath, I fell into a fever, which, notwithstanding all the medicines which were given me, continued 7 days. On the 8th day I was entirely exhausted, that all my limbs trembled, and my tongue cleaved to the roof of my mouth. Then there came to me the angel of death in a terrible shape. His head touched the sky, while his feet stood on the lowest depths of the earth. He held a sword in his right hand and a cup in his left, and there were 10 other angelic beings with him, whom I took to be his servants. I would have shrieked so loudly at their sight that the inhabitants of heaven and of earth must have been petrified. But the angelic beings fell on me and held my tongue, and some of them pressed my veins so as to force out my soul. Then said I, "Exalted spirits, I will give all that I possess for my life." But one of them struck me in the face and almost shattered my jawbone, saying, "Enemy of Aliyun El, he accepts no ransom." The angel of death then placed his sword upon my throat and gave me the cup, which I was forced to empty to the dregs. And this was my death. My consciousness now lost, I was washed, wrapped in a shroud, and interred. But when my grave was covered with earth, my soul returned to my body, and I was sorely afraid in my solitude. But soon there came 2 angelic beings with a parchment in their hands, and told unto me all the good and all the bad that I had done while living in the body. And I was compelled to write it down with my own hand and to attest it by my own signature. Whereupon they suspended the scroll on my neck and vanished. There they appeared 2 other dark angels with blue eyes, namely Munkar and Nakir, each with a column of fire in his hand, one single spark of which, if it had dropped on the earth, would have consumed it. They called to me in a voice like thunder, "Who is your Yahuwah?" Overcome with fright, I lost my senses and said shudderingly, "You are my Yahuwahs." But they cried, "You liest, enemy of Aliyun El," and struck me a blow with the column of fire that sent me down to the 7th earth. As soon as I returned again to my grave, they said, "O earth, punish the man who has been rebellious against his Yahuwah." Instantly the earth crushed me, so that my bones were almost ground to powder. And she said, "Enemy of Aliyun El, I hated you while you didst tread my surface, but by the glory of Aliyun El, I will avenge me now while you're lying in my bowels." The angels then opened one of the gateways of hell and cried, "Take this sinner who did not believe in Aliyun El, boil and burn him." Thereupon I was dragged into the center of hell by a chain which was 70 cubits in length, and as often as the flames consumed my skin, I received a fresh one, but only to suffer anew the torments of burning. At the same time I was so hungry that I prayed for food, but I only obtained the putrefied fruit of the tree Sachem, which not merely increased my hunger, but even caused the most horrid pain and violent thirst. And when I asked for something to drink, nothing but boiling water was given me. At last they urged one end of the chain with such violence into my mouth that it came out through my back and chained me hand and foot. When Yashua heard this, he wept with compassion, but demanded of the skull to describe hell more minutely. "Now then," continued the skull, "O prophet of Aliyun El, that hell consists of 7 floors, one below the other. The uppermost is for hypocrites, the second for liars, the third for deceivers, the fourth for the users, the fifth for those who deny the holy tablets, reject the Holy Scriptures and lie on those sent, and sixth for idolaters, and the seventh for the sinners. The last mentioned abode is least terrible, and sinners are saved from it through repentance. But in the others the torture and agony are so great that if you, O prophet of Aliyun, Aliyun El, shouldst but see it, you wouldst wept with compassion as a woman who had lost her only child. The outer part of hell is of copper, and the inner part of lead. Its floor is punishment and the wrath of the Almighty, its ceiling. The walls are of fire, not clear and luminous, but amber fire, and diffusing a close, disgusting stench, being fed with men and idols. Yashua wept long, and then inquired of the skull, to which family he belonged during the lifetime. He replied, I am a descendant of the prophet Elias. And what desirest you now? That Aliyun El would recall me to life, that I might serve him with my whole heart, so as one day to be worthy of paradise. Yeshua prayed to Aliyun El, O Yahuwah, you knowest this man and me better than we know ourselves and are omnipotent. Then Aliyun El said to him, I had long ago resolved upon that which he desires, since, indeed, he had many excellencies, and was especially benevolent to the poor. He may return to the world through repentance, and if he serve me henceforward faithfully, all his sins shall be forgiven. Yeshua cried unto the skull, Be again a perfect man, through the omnipotence of Aliyun Eli. And while the words were still on his lips, there rose up a man who looked more blooming than in his former life, and cried, I confess that there is but one El Elo, and that Abraham was his friend. Moses saw him face to face, and you, Yashua, his soul and word. I confess, moreover, that the resurrection is as certain as death, and that hell and paradise do really exist. This man lived 66 years after his resuscitation, and spent his days in fasting and his shadow hours in prayer. Nor did he alienate a single moment from the service of the Rabboni until he died. But the more miracles Yeshua performed before the eyes of the people, the greater was their unbelief. For all that they were not able to comprehend, they believed to be sorcery and delusion, instead of perceiving therein a proof of his mission. Even the 12 apostles whom he had chosen to propagate the new doctrine were not steadfast in the faith, and asked of him one day that he might cause a table covered with all sorts of fine foods to descend from heaven. A table shall be given you, said a voice from heaven, but whosoever shall thereafter continue in unbelief shall suffer severe punishment. Thereupon there descended 2 clouds with a golden table, on which there stood a covered dish of silver. Many of the Israelites who were present exclaimed, Behold the sorcerer! What new delusion has he wrought? But these scoffers were instantly changed into swine. And on seeing it, Yeshua prayed, O Yahuwah, let this table lead us to salvation and not ruin. Then said he to the apostles, Let him who is the greatest among you rise and uncover this dish. But Simon, the oldest apostle, said, Rabboni, you art the most worthy to behold this heavenly food first. Yeshua then washed his hands and removed the cover and said, In the name of Aliyun El. And behold, there became visible a large baked fish, with neither bones nor scales, which diffused a fragrance around like the fruits of paradise. Round the fish there lay 5 small loaves, and on it salt, pepper, and other spices. Soul of Aliyun El, said Simon, are these viands from this world or from the other? But Yeshua replied, Are not both worlds, and all that they contain, the works of Yahuwah? Receive whatever he had given with grateful hearts, and ask not whence it comes, but if the appearance of this fish be not sufficiently miraculous, to you shall behold a still greater sign. Then turning to the fish he said, Live by the will of 6. The fish then began to stir and to move, so that the apostles fled with fear. But Yeshua called them back and said, Why do you flee from that which you have desired? He then called to the fish, Be again what you was before. And immediately it lay there, as it had come down from heaven. The disciples then prayed Yeshua that he might eat of it first, but he replied, I have not lusted for it. He that has lusted for it, let him eat of it now. But when the disciples refused to eat of it, because they now saw that their request had been sinful, Yeshua called many aged men, many deaf, sick, blind, and lame, and invited them to eat of the fish. There now came 1,300, which ate of the fish and were satisfied. But whenever one piece was cut off from the fish, another grew again in its place, so that it still laid there in its tire as if no one had touched it. But the guests were not only satisfied, but even were healed of all their diseases. The aged became young, and blind saw, and the deaf heard, the dumb spake, and the lame regained their vigorous limbs. When the apostles saw this, they regretted that they had not eaten, and whoever beheld the men that had been cured and invigorated thereby regretted, in like manner, not to have shared in the repast. When, therefore, at the prayer of Yashua, a similar table descended again from heaven. The whole people, rich and poor, young and old, sick and whole, came to be refreshed by these heavenly viands. This lasted during 40 days. At the dawn of day, the table, borne on the clouds, descended in the face of the sons of Israel. And before the sun appeared to set, it gradually rose up again, until it vanished behind the clouds. But as, notwithstanding this, many still doubted whether it really came from heaven, Yeshua prayed no longer for its return, and threatened the unbelievers with the punishment of Yahuwah. Nevertheless, in the hearts of the apostles, every doubt respecting the mission of their Yahuwah was removed, and they travelled partly in company, partly alone, through the whole of Palestine, preaching the faith in Aliyun El and his prophet Yeshua. These miracles angered the priest and the Pharisees, and they called him a sorcerer and said he was changing the laws, saying, "Eat what is good for you." According to this new revelation, he was permitting them to eat many things which had been prohibited to the children of Israel.